Welcome back to the Amid the Mess podcast, where we talk all about health and happiness amid the mess and the chaos that is life with children and a busy job and a household and all the things. Hence the name, Amid the Mess. So today I spoke with Brittany Johnson, who has a PhD and is a dietitian and a supplement scientist at GNC in the US. She is passionate about translating complex science to practical applications for health. Now, Brittany first spent 10 years working in academia before moving to work for GNC, where she works to provide scientific evidence for a wide variety of supplements. She knows so much about the supplement industry, the science that goes behind all the claims out there about supplements, and she is the person to speak to about supplements. And so that's what I did today. I asked her all sorts of questions about quality, health claims, the science. Is there a bias behind industry-funded supplement science? And I also go into a little bit of what are the best supplements for being tired. And I mean, for us tired people, probably the parents I'm speaking to here, if you've got young children, and like me, you just never get enough sleep. We go into what kind of supplements could help give us a little bit more energy when the sleep is hard to come by. So I really enjoyed this episode with Brittany. She's just so intelligent, so smart. She knows she's really a woman in the science, which I absolutely love. So thank you, Brittany, for that fantastic conversation. And without further ado, let's hear it. So, Brittany, what is one of the biggest misconceptions about supplements?
I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions about supplements, but I think the number one misconception about supplements is that they're not regulated. This gets thrown out quite a bit, and they are regulated, but they're not necessarily regulated to the degree of, let's say, a pharmaceutical medication. And I think that's where the misconception comes through, because people will then just say, oh, they're not regulated. However, we do have to submit documentation to the FDA, the FTC, at least here in the United States. They are monitoring all of that. We have to make sure that our ingredients are safe, and you have to have documentation for regulatory compliance and so forth. So all of those are regulated, and they don't allow you to say these outlandish claims. You have to have actual scientific and research proof to support your claims on the product. And then, of course, one of the biggest things that they don't allow you to do is talk about a product preventing or curing any type of disease. So this is where I see a huge misconception in our industry, because oftentimes they are comparing it to a pharmaceutical drug that does require certain steps, such as clinical trials through different phases to ensure they're safe. However, we have to make sure our ingredients are safe by making sure that they are considered GRAS, which is generally recognized as safe, or we have enough data to make sure that they don't cause any toxicity problems. So I think in general, there are a lot of checks and balances in the supplement industry that people don't talk about because they just want to throw out, oh, they're not regulated.
Interesting. And so you talk a lot about the US. Do you know in the UK whether it's a similar situation?
So that's where I'm going to be completely honest here. I don't have as much knowledge on the global regulatory components across different countries. However, I do know that kind of like the EU does have some of the strictest regulations. And you have to provide all that documentation anytime you're bringing in a new supplement. I know another country that's has really high regulation requirements is Mexico. So they all have their own regulatory compliance. And something that we do at my company is we work really closely with people who are located in those countries, doing that regulatory compliance to ensure that what we're doing is appropriate for their country requirements. So it varies from country to country, which makes it really complex. And I do not have that specific knowledge across all the
Fair
countries.
enough. Fair enough. Absolutely. But it's really interesting that you say that it's a general misconception, that people kind of, they can, yeah, talk negatively and say, oh, yeah, it's not regulated and don't take that.
Yeah.
Oh, be careful. It's really refreshing to hear. So, but I'm curious. So, as a consumer, how can we know a little bit about the health claims of a particular supplement? I mean, is there a particular one we can use as an example? Does anyone come to mind like that you can say this is how you know the health claims are believable?
Yeah, I think it's not quite as simple as an example, and I'll tell you why, because different brands have different, I guess, ethics, you could call it. So there are going to be bad players in the field, right? There always are going to be. However, there are some brands who are doing quality above and beyond what the required standard is. So I think for consumers is really finding that brand that you trust and making sure that one selfishly, they have a science team because the scientist with the background, with the knowledge, they're the ones that are looking at the clinical research and the scientific evidence to be able to make those claims. It's really hard, I think, for the average consumer to go and do their own research and looking for, peer-reviewed
Mm,
publications. And then how do you translate that? Because if you don't have that knowledge, now granted, some people do, right? Some people do have that ability to go and read a scientific paper and understand what those conclusions mean. But your average person probably doesn't understand the nuances and the nitty gritty of scientific papers and jargon. So having a team at that company who that's their main job is really important. So if you look into
yeah.
the brand, if you see that they have scientists on their team, and then some people will go as far as putting their published papers online and actually showing you the evidence. So as a consumer, you can have more faith that, hey, they're not just making this up. They actually have the documentation and they're giving me the resources so that I can, if I want to, go and verify their work that they've done.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you want to drop any names. Are there any particular brands that you think do this really, really well?
I think GNC does it really well. I work for GNC, so I'm selfishly going to say that because I'm behind the scenes and we have an
Okay.
entire team of scientists with PhDs, masters, registered dietitians, all working on the formulas, reading and critiquing the scientific evidence. But we work with a lot of ingredient suppliers as well that also have teams like that, and they're critiquing their own studies and making sure that they can understand it. A couple other people in this field too are doing this really well and like bringing that scientific knowledge to the forefront, at least here in the United States. Then they're talking about the science, they're talking about the clinical research. And I think that's a piece where consumers are wanting to know, hey, this actually does work. And you're not just telling me that it's supposed to improve XYZ.
Okay, fantastic. That's weirdly that's news to me. Like,
Really?
and I like hearing that. I have a scientific background as well,
Okay.
but yeah, just to think about non-pharmaceutical supplements out there, that there are these huge teams of scientists, researching the literature, and I don't know, I can imagine you guys in the lab mixing things
Yeah.
together, and like I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Um,
I wish
but
that
do you
people
think?
could be
Yeah.
a fly on the wall sometimes when we look at research because we really do tear it apart. Because we want to make
Mm,
sure that we're providing the best, most efficacious, so like products that actually work to the consumer. And I just, to your point, people don't realize how much work actually goes into making sure that it's valid. And we're all very passionate and we don't want to just put something together to try to make a sale. We want something that's actually meaningful and impactful to people's lives.
yeah, fantastic. Interesting. Now, so this is all the best examples, like supplements that have a big scientific team behind them. But
Yeah.
do you know of any claims of a supplement that you personally or professionally think might be a dangerous claim or unsupported by evidence?
Anytime you're seeing a claim that is super not believable, that should raise alarm bells for you as a consumer. If it's trying to say that you're going to double your muscle size in 2 weeks, that's not physically possible. And so you should be kind of questioning if they're saying a claim along those lines, what else is going on within that company? because you can't change the science just to make a sale. So anytime you're seeing something even such as, oh, lose 10 pounds in 1 week, again, that's not believable, nor would that be healthy. So things that are exaggerated like that with claims should definitely raise some alarm bells for people. And then anytime, of course, it's talking about preventing or curing a disease, because, or even a comparison of a drug, you can't mimic what a pharmaceutical drug would do with supplements. And so I think those are kind of some
Mm.
watch outs for people to look at as they're selecting products or reading health claims.
Okay, that's really good advice. Thank you. Now, just quickly going into your background, because you clearly seem very passionate about what you do, and I love that. Why did you get into supplement science?
It kind of happened. I was in academia, so I was teaching at university for almost a decade. I was teaching in nutrition graduate programs and undergraduate programs, really helping train the next generation of dietitians and sports scientists. And I had done my research in looking at wellness interventions for nutrition and exercise to improve health and overall wellness. And I just kind of decided that I wanted to be able to help impact people a little bit more than where I felt I was able to with teaching students. And I wanted to get more into the research side. However, academic and grant funding is extremely challenging and very difficult. And for my own personal work life balance, I just took a step back and questioned if I wanted to do that for the rest of my career. So I
Yeah,
started
it's like a
looking.
constant hustle, isn't it?
Yeah. And this was a
Yes.
time, COVID was happening. And so things were changing in higher education and university. And I wasn't sure I wanted to have the rest of my career be that, even though I loved research and I loved teaching. I just took a step back and thought, what do I want to do next? And that's sort of when I landed at GNC, because I was looking for jobs that blended my love for research and my love for translating super complex science to make practical recommendations for people to help improve their lives. And I came across GNC, which I wasn't necessarily targeting the supplement industry at all. In fact, I'll be completely frank. And I was one that was sort of anti supplements too, saying, oh, you can get everything in your food first. You don't need supplements, and supplements aren't regulated, right? I had that same rhetoric in my brain. And then being able to get into this industry really opened up my eyes to how false all of that information was and how rigorous the scientific component of these companies are. And again, there's always going to be bad players, right? So I'm not saying that there's not some shenanigans going on out there. However, at GNC, I really pride on the work that we do because our science team is very passionate and we are very strict on what we allow versus what we don't allow based off of scientific evidence. So that's sort of how I got into my role of just my background. I was a dietitian, kind of looking at more how do I prevent disease? How do I help support and improve people's lives? To the research component, to then being able to combine everything and then also have products out there that really help people improve those aspects of their life. Obviously, in combination with lifestyle changes, because a supplement's not going to change everything by itself.
No, no, you have to also do the right healthy stuff.
Correct.
Definitely. Fantastic. Now, just a little personal aside. Have you got a favorite supplement yourself?
Right now, I'm really on the creatine kick. I know everybody is.
Ah, yeah.
Creatine
Well,
is, oh, go ahead.
carry on, carry on. I was going to say I definitely have questions about that later in my list. But so why? Why
Yeah,
creatine for you?
creatine really is having a moment right now. And I think it's because it's starting to become more clear that there are benefits outside of your traditional gym and exercise benefit that you have traditionally seen with creatine. And fundamentally, creatine is a molecule in the body that's part of our energy production, especially when we're doing short bursts of exercise or high intensity work. That creatine allows us to generate ATP, so an energy source inside of our cells, very quickly. And more data is coming out about how it can help even with your cognitive function. Because if you think about your brain and how much energy your brain uses every day to think, to process information, keep that checklist, who needs to go where, right? All of these different tasks. Creatine is a really good energy source for your brain. And I for me, I did this really deep dive paper to make sure to see what is all of this new data and is it valid? Is it true? Or is it just people trying to maybe like sell an ingredient? And it is true, right? We're learning so much more about creatine every single day, and it's highly, highly studied in randomized clinical trials, which is considered your gold standard in scientific evidence. And I started taking it, and I can feel the difference, and that's usually what people start to comply with a supplement is when they feel the difference when they're taking it.
Amazing. Yeah, so that is so interesting. It's currently also something I'm experimenting with,
Wonderful.
um, specifically for those cognitive benefits, because I am going through a phase of long-term, not kind of long-term sleep deprivation. If having a baby, it means basically at least 2 years of not sleeping properly.
Yeah.
It's tough. I'm about 11 months in and I
Okay.
feel the effects of my sleep deprivation. So I'm like, I'm taking a high dose of creatine just to hopefully save my brain a little bit.
And have you noticed the difference since you've been taking creatine for your brain component?
It's really difficult to know because I
Yeah.
generally feel so tired because
Okay.
I'm just never sleeping more than like 5, 6 hours a night.
Oof, that's rough.
It is rough. so it's difficult to know, but some days, early days. So when our baby Daisy was just born, I was doing this already preemptively. And then for the first 3, 4 months, I did feel amazing.
Okay.
And I was telling all my friends, like, I'm not actually that tired. I'm feeling good. I think it might be the creatine. So who knows? But I think long-term sleep deprivation for so many months
Yeah.
does but then again for me it's I would not be able to know what I would be like without it.
Right.
I could be like absolutely floored with tiredness
Yeah.
if I wasn't taking this. But I have hope, and I do a little bit of muscle strengthening stuff at home, so I'm
Okay.
hoping like it's going to give me a bit of that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. But yeah, so it's very interesting that you hit on this one, because I actually wanted to talk about tiredness levels
Yeah.
in people, say, coming up to late 30s, 40s. They might be in my phase of life with young children. So creatine is potentially a good one. Have you got any other ideas about energy giving supplements that might just help a little bit when sleep is impossible to get perfect?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, the creatine, there's definitely data on specifically with sleep deprivation and improving your cognitive function. So we kind of hit that. One other very obvious ingredient is caffeine. Caffeine is
Mm,
certainly a proven energy, mental focus ingredient. There's a lot of data on the cognitive component when you are taking caffeine. However, some people are caffeine sensitive, and so I understand that that can be difficult and challenging. So there's sort of this other category of ingredients called nootropics, and that's just simply ingredients that your brain likes in order to help your neurotransmitter, so the messengers in your brain kind of adapt and function a little bit better. So there's a lot in that category. Sometimes the data is there, sometimes it's not. So it's hard to give a very specific, this is the ingredient that you should be trying. It's experimental. So I think it's one of those things where you have to try it yourself to see if it works. And then there's other ingredients, for example, your B complex, so your B vitamins. B vitamins actually
mm,
help you metabolize your food, and our food is our fuel. So if you
yeah.
are low on your B vitamins for whatever reason, having that outside source of a B vitamin can help improve those energy levels because it helps you break down your food for fuel and give you that energy a little bit better. So those are just some different, ways that you can try to use different supplements or experiment with different supplements to see what works for your own personal lifestyle. Again, not everything is going to work for everybody. You're not going to feel the
Yeah.
difference right away on some of those ingredients. A really good example is sometimes like the creatine, for example, there are studies that take up to 8 weeks, or it's an entire week before you start to feel that effect. So it's not like you're going to take it day one and automatically feel better. It is
You're not going to
consistent.
feel like a hit. Yeah, it like takes a while to build
Yeah.
up in your body.
I think caffeine
Yeah.
is a good example of what would be like an immediate. You are gonna like feel that mental clarity and that cognitive function because that is a very acute ingredient. But there are other ingredients again where you have to be taking it a little bit more consistently in order for your body to really get those benefits.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Now, before the question leaves my mind, before we leave the creatine
Yeah.
conversation, something that's also been what I've been wondering. I have a friend who has really bad chronic fatigue. So this is not about being sleep deprived, but just the ME. I don't know what the full name of ME, that the disease where you literally are so tired,
Mhm.
can't do anything. I've been just thinking in my own head, would this person benefit from creatine supplementation? And do you know if there's any data about this?
Not any data on that specific condition that I know of right now. However, there are a lot more, I guess, clinical populations that they're starting to use creatine supplement in to see if there's a benefit. So things like chronic disease, specifically the ones that are related to more like musculoskeletal or even some sort of brain component where they think that that creatine can help support some of that fatigue and that function. There's a pilot study that just came out, actually was just published in Alzheimer's. And so that neurological benefit of the creatine supplementation shows initial promise. And then there's a couple other musculoskeletal conditions like Parkinson's or even traumatic brain injury where they've seen creatine supplementation can help improve. Those studies are relatively small sample sizes, though, so it's really hard for us to definitively say, yes, this creatine can help
Yeah.
X condition. And oftentimes people don't really want to touch that area of clinical research because it is more challenging regarding IRB and is it safe to combine the creatine with the pharmaceutical medications because it hasn't been
Mm,
studied, so we don't know.
yeah.
However, I think that creatine is one of those ingredients that's very safe because there is so much data. There's not a lot of adverse events reported in all of the studies that have been completed over the last, 2, 3 decades. And creatine is within our body naturally, right? So you
Yeah.
do have this ability to metabolize it. And so I don't anticipate there being any problem. So for me, I think it's be an N of one and just try it if you're that person,
Yes.
because you only know if it works for your body. And sometimes our science just isn't there yet. And so you have to try it on your own first.
Yeah. And there's nothing to lose when it comes to creatine because
Exactly.
it doesn't have a negative effect.
Correct.
Interesting. So one more funny thing, it just popped into my mind. The audience might giggle at this a bit. So our uh, our 11-month-old baby is really strong, like
Really?
crazy strong. She started walking 2 weeks ago, like in 10.5 months,
Wow.
and she's always been madly strong. She's tiny. She's like small but mighty. Um, and I've been taking creatine throughout, kind of breastfeeding her. And in my mind, I'm like, has she been getting some of this creatine through my breast milk? Is that even possible? Do you know? Or is it just completely a silly thought?
That's interesting. I would have to think about that because typically creatine is inside your cells, right? So we store it inside of our muscle cells. And when we process it in our blood, it becomes creatinine and then it's excreted in our urine. So I'm not sure how it would transfer to breast milk. I think there's a good theory there. We don't know though
But
because we've
probably
not
no
studied.
research
Yeah. And
person has ever gone into that.
well, and pregnant women, breastfeeding women are considered a sacred population. And so it's really challenging to do research in that population because of that, because there
Yeah.
are these unknowns and you don't want to take a risk of harming a baby. However, again, creatine is one of those ingredients where even if the data is not there specifically, we are seeing emerging data actually in pregnancy that are benefits to the creatine supplementation. I haven't seen any in breastfeeding though, but I do think that there is some sort of theory around that could be valid.
A hypothesis
Yeah,
could be made, but it still has to
yeah,
be tested.
correct.
But it hasn't done any harm, thankfully. She's very
Yes,
healthy. She's very good. So
yes,
she's just extremely strong,
that's
like
amazing.
crazy strong.
Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, anyway, I just thought it's a little funny thing.
It is. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so moving on a bit, I also really wanted to ask about supplement quality. Are there any particular supplements where it's more important to do some digging into the quality of them? I have one in mind, but I want not to lead the witness. I don't want
Yeah.
to lead you into it. I'm going to ask if you don't mention it, but have you got any in mind?
I think that one area where you want to ensure that maybe they're sourcing the ingredient from an appropriate vendor, ingredient supplier is herbals. because herbals, depending on how much is actually extracted in that particular plant, can really depend on how much is actually the active ingredient. So you're wanting to look for,
Mm.
more standardized ingredients. And this is sometimes where those trademark ingredients can be a benefit for consumers looking and shopping for products, because typically if they're trademarked, then they are standardized to a certain percentage of the active ingredient. And so that's something where you can see maybe a little bit higher quality. Now, that's not always the case, because you can have generic non trademark ingredients that do have that same percentage of the active. But it's just kind of a question that you may want to ask yourself when you're looking at more of those herbal botanical ingredients and making
And
sure.
could you name a few? So I can't think of any
Yeah,
herbal
ashwagandha.
type of.
Ashwagandha is a good
Oh, okay.
example. I know that one is pretty popular right now. Even that ingredient could be beneficial for some of your consumers too, because it helps with like stress component. And obviously, being a parent is
Mm.
extremely stressful. So
Oh.
that's a good example that you can look at where, like a vitamin D level is going to be typically a vitamin D level. One comment on the quality component though is something that's practical, because you may not have the knowledge to look at all of that information, is look for third party testing. So if you look
Okay.
for third party verified testing, they're testing for the content in that product. So if it's telling you, for example, there's 200 milligrams of ashwagandha and they test it, it's going to be within the appropriate range to make sure that it actually has the 200 milligrams. So those third party
Mm.
verifications can be things like NSF, or it's LGC, but you would want to look for like an informed choice or informed sport, because they're actually going and taking the product off of the shelf, and they're going and testing that batch to make sure that, one, it doesn't have any contaminants in it, and then two, that the actual ingredients are at the dose that the label claim is making.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, so third party tested, and that's what you can kind of read on the label
Mhm.
somewhere. There'll be like an organization that's done
Correct.
that third party
Yeah,
testing.
there's typically a little icon, or if you again are browsing the supplement company and you read online, they're going to call that out, because it is something that people are going above and beyond the standard. It's not a requirement in our industry to have that third party verification with those extra like certifications. So that's something where, again, it just shows the commitment from the company that they want to show you, hey, we don't have anything to hide because we know we're doing it the right way.
Perfect. Yeah, that's really good. The supplement I was thinking about that I've heard it's really important to check for quality is fish oils.
Yeah, that's also a good one. Especially because, to your point, let me ask you, why do you hear what do you hear about the fish oil?
I kind of hear that they can go rancid, they can go bad. If say a company has just been kept them in a storage facility for years and years in a massive batch,
Yeah.
and that they need to be fresh enough. Maybe they go bad with light exposure or something like that.
Yeah,
Am I correct?
I mean, all of these ingredients do have all of those, I guess, challenges that you have to face. You want to make sure that you are, again, shopping for those products that have the appropriate expiration dates and everything like that on the actual product in the bottle. One thing about the fish oil, because that is, I think that that's a really valid point of making sure that they're even sourced from a good ingredient source. Like, what type of fish oil is it, and where are you getting that fish oil derived from is an important component, but also the ratio. So, a lot of times when we see fish oil, they're not using the actual fish oil that has a higher EPA or DHA, which are those omega-3 fatty acids that are really where the benefits are behind a fish oil supplement. And they're
Yeah.
using other sources of oil, which, again, it's not necessarily
Ah.
bad. However, it's not the highest quality. So you do want to look for those fish oils that have a little bit more potent EPA and DHA in comparison to the total amount of the fish oil in the product.
Okay, and then also the amount of EPA and DHA that they state then needs to be third party tested. That that actually is the case.
Yeah, you can look for some that are
Yeah.
third party tested.
Yeah.
Not all of them are going to be, but hopefully, especially if it's something that you want to make sure those third party verifications can help. And then one other element on that is, I know one thing too. I know this is probably not necessarily your group of people that listen to your podcast. However, athletes, Those
Mm.
informed choice, informed sport, and NSF sport are really important third party verifications because they're testing for any banned substances that would disqualify an athlete from participating in their sport.
Mm. Yes, very important.
Yeah,
And they might unknowingly be taking something
correct.
and get this thing in their blood and go, oh my goodness.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
disqualified. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, very
Exactly.
good. Yeah, very interesting. Um, Now moving on to a topic that I think you're quite passionate about, and I want to get into it. So about potential for bias. So you wanted to talk a bit about industry-funded research. So is there such a thing as biased research into supplements?
I think there's always going to be yes, but that's not always the case. Again, this goes back to what I was taught when I was in my undergrad education. And it was if a study is funded by a company, it's automatically not valid. And I really struggle with that now being in the industry because the funding has to come from somewhere.
Yeah,
And with everything that's changing with, grants for health and everything being sort of reduced, it's going to become even more challenging to have an outside source that's non industry funded in order to use your supplement maybe and test it. Typically those large scale like government funded research is not super interested in how a specific ingredient of a company works, and they may look at, for example, the creatine component. But if we want research, especially if we want research as a company on our own ingredients because we want to show that we believe in the clinical proof, we have to fund it. Nobody else is going to fund that because research is
yeah,
very, very expensive.
yes,
And so this shows an extra level of quality commitment from the supplement company if they are investing in clinical research and basically funding the study. Now, there are checks and balances that can occur that help reduce any potential feeling of a bias. We have, for example, we partner with universities and we have the university run the clinical study for us. So we tell them, hey, we want to study creatine and maybe for cognitive performance. Can you help us? And so they say yes. So they actually, in collaboration with us, we design the study. And then they are the ones who are recruiting participants, running the clinical research, and then also analyzing the data and running the statistical analyses. And then it gets reported back to us. So we're not involved in that process. So it helps kind of, I guess, reduce that bias if there is a bias. But I will say for myself, I think it's possible for people to do that without having a partnership because at the end of the day, we're passionate and we're scientists, and I'm not going to have my integrity be dismissed because I suddenly want to skew data because that's not appropriate. And peer reviewed
yeah,
publications is really important component of that. So if I were to run a clinical study, for example, in my role right now at GNC, I do oversee our clinical studies and our research pipeline. So if I'm going to be running the study because I have a PhD, I've done research in the past, and then I go to publish it, I can provide that data as open access. So anybody who wanted to maybe challenge the results, they can run the data and the statistical analyses to show that we did indeed find what we found. And I think that those are ways that we can continue to do research and show that the industry funded or industry sponsored research is not automatically biased. There are ways that we can do it that reduce that. And at the end of the day, I'm curious. I'm a scientist. I want to know if it works, and I'm not going to fib the truth.
yeah. That's really interesting to hear. Really, really nice because probably a lot of listeners might just have their mind view just go a little bit like expanded, like oh, because it's an easy thing for people just to assume. Oh yeah, oh that they paid for it, so people. I think in general as a culture, money can have a bit of a negative thing for some reason,
Right.
culturally. So I think big companies with a lot of money instantly go, oh, big money, oh, they must have some kind of negative intentions. So it's really nice to hear you speak about actually scientists are really passionate and really curious, and you have ethics, and you have all these checks and balances.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. And
So
even at the end of the
yeah,
day, let's say it doesn't work. well, that's how we learn to make our formula better. And so it's not lost on us. And there's been a series of research studies that in the past were done, and it just helps you reformulate and adapt to make a meaningful formula.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work and you say if you would hide that and then you would sell it anyway, people wouldn't keep buying those supplements because they wouldn't work.
Exactly.
So it's not in
Exactly.
your interest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Um, are there any other things that might drive you bananas about how general media, social media, or the culture speaks about supplement science or just supplements at all?
Oh, goodness. I think I've seen a lot of bashing in our industry and trying to
Hmm.
call out the bad players, which I understand is an important aspect. You don't want people who are doing shenanigans, having company and pushing out products. But I feel like it's not being done in a right way because then it becomes more confusing for the consumer and almost just makes that distrust even stronger. So, is there a way for us, I think, to change the rhetoric and not be so negative all the time and rather just be positive about, hey, these are the good things that are happening and here are the good players, here's like the science, here's that evidence, rather than, I guess, pointing a finger to the people who are doing it the wrong way? Because it
Yeah.
just confuses the message. I think about nutrition research a lot in general. We are always trying to find the villain, and that becomes really confusing. You know, fat's bad, sugar's bad, gluten's bad, whatever the main thing is, we're trying to find one thing that's wrong, but we don't live our lives that way. You know, we don't just eat sugar all day every day. We eat sugar as part of other food components. And so it's really hard in our space, at least in nutrition research, to say that this one thing is the bad thing. And I think our media likes to call out the bad thing and really fixate
Yeah.
on what is the headline and the tag that can grab the most attention for, I guess, clickbait. And it's really difficult
Mm.
because that, again, just continues the problem of those misconceptions.
Absolutely. I hear you loud and clear. I kind of I see this in parallel in a different industry. So I'm a fitness instructor and
Okay.
a yoga teacher. And I kind of I see what you're saying because even in the fitness industry, people do the same. They're like constantly bashing each other.
Hmm.
And I'm like, why? Why would some mobility person be bashing yoga?
Right.
And then they're bashing aerobics or running. And I'm like, it's all great, and there's something for everyone. And let's be graceful about things and not, yeah. So I guess in the same way, if you, kind of, it's a bit of a parallel.
Yeah,
So I get your pet peeve. And there's a way of doing things if you think there's bad players, but not in the kind of headliney,
exactly.
clickbaity
Exactly.
way. Yeah, fantastic. Um, so, well, before we finish with the last couple of closing questions, before you mention one of your favorite supplements is creatine, have you got any more favorites? I'm curious because your head is so into the research. I would love to just hear your personal take. Maybe what personal supplements you like taking.
Yeah, I mean, I take quite a few supplements every single day. I have done a lot of research, obviously, in looking at for my own personal health goals. What am I trying to accomplish? So creatine is definitely top. I do take a protein supplement as well. I just truly can't eat the amount of protein that I need to support my strength training and be able to build and support my muscle. My goal is to be deadlifting at the age of 90, and so I want
Oh,
to make sure that I
yes.
can continue to like have that good muscle structure. HMB, excuse me, is another one. My basic vitamins, fish oil, and probiotics, as well as some fiber supplements occasionally too, are part of my staples every single day. And then I do mix collagen in my coffee every morning too. Those are my staples. I will have a few that get into my regimen every once in a while that are a little bit different, like a greens powder with antioxidants. But for the most part, I'm really looking at my foundational, what are my requirements for my health goals? And those are where I hit.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And all of those sound actually very relevant for tired, busy parents who might be listening. I personally love a bit of protein as well
Yeah.
because when you're running around feeding little ones, it's, sometimes a challenge giving yourself all the nutrition that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And then tiredness can also come from not having enough protein in your day.
Yeah. And I think that's a good
Yeah.
point too for relevant for your listeners is if you're running around with little kiddos, you're typically snacking on their food typically, right? Or like eating their
Yes.
leftover foods, or maybe
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
a quick bagel here because you're on the go and you're running out the door. And those are typically a little bit higher in carbohydrates. Not to say that carbohydrates are bad because they are a primary energy source for our bodies. However, if you were to just grab that protein shake on the go while you're running out the door to get them to school or daycare or whatever it may be, that can really help to stabilize your blood sugars too. And I think that's oftentimes where we see like a nice spike in our blood sugars from a carbohydrate source. And then we sort of dip down because that's just how our body goes naturally. But that protein can help stabilize your blood sugars a bit more, giving you more of that energy throughout the day too, more sustainable energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd highly recommend for any on the go, busy, tired parents.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I have a funny anecdote from in my university days. People used to call me protein girl. So I was so obsessed with protein.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So
Too funny.
now I'm feeding our little like 11-month-old like chicken drumsticks. I'm
Yeah,
like, go
I
eat
love
them.
it. That's awesome.
So a couple of closing questions. You have your head in the research. You sound like such a smart, intelligent woman, and I love it. Fantastic. But we're all human
Yeah.
beings, and everyone has imperfections. If you're willing to share, what's one of your imperfections?
Uh, well, let's see. Personally, I think one of my imperfections is I operate at a really high level and I sort of expect everybody to operate at that same level. So I have really high expectations for, let's say, deliverables in my own, personal career and work that I do. So and even from my students, I think that that's a past thing too, that I would see of just like, hey, you can do it like at this level. Why are you not? So that's something that I'm trying to walk away and step back and realize everybody processes information different. They come to the table different, and that's a strength. And then, my own personal, yes, I'm a dietitian. Yes, I love to exercise, but I don't have everything dialed in. It's nearly impossible to have a perfect diet. It's impossible to have a perfect exercise regimen and stick to everything so seeming perfect. So that's something where,
Mm,
I'm imperfect too as a dietitian, as somebody who's in the science all day, every day, that my diet's not
yeah.
perfect. I don't take my supplements every single day. Sometimes I miss it, right? So I'm not perfect in that area either.
Yeah. So I mean, have you got any guilty pleasures to share food wise?
Ooh,
What does the dietitian think? Oh no, but you love it so much.
I love dessert. I mean, I'm such a sweet tooth, and unfortunately, I can bake very well. And so I love baked
Ooh.
goods, specifically cookies. I really love cookies. So that is something where I do enjoy it because life is short and you need to enjoy it. And I don't have it, every single meal, every single day, but I do have a small dessert daily.
Yeah. 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 Oh, fantastic. Well,
Yeah,
thank you for sharing. And it's nice. Like we are all human beings,
we
and
are.
life is also to be enjoyed.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
So, do you have anything to share regarding, what services you offer and anything the listeners, if they want to find out more about you, about the company you work for, how can they find out and what do you offer?
Yeah, so thinking about GNC, we have a page where if you go to gnc.com, and I'm pretty sure you'd be able to access this from the UK. I don't know for sure, but at the bottom, if you scroll all the way, we have a science and innovation page where you can actually see our entire science team and everybody behind our first party products. So we're the ones who are doing the science, doing the research, and making sure that we can also communicate that benefit to our customer. So I think that that's the service that we provide, is being able to create and develop really meaningful formulas for the consumer, and then also provide education. So we do have a blog, we have a learning center at gnc.com where you can go and read about different ingredients or different supplements to help you. And we have registered dietitians who are writing those blogs. So again, people who
Oh,
are the
amazing.
experts in nutrition developing that content. It's not just a journalist, which nothing against journalists, but we are people who are in the science every single day helping to translate that benefit. So if you want to learn more about that, that's definitely a great resource for you to go to and be able to get some more education around supplements in general. And then in regards to, like I personally don't do services. I work for GNC. And so that's something that I provide my services through that avenue. But if,
Yeah.
you are interested, I think you can link my LinkedIn or anything like that, and feel free. People can ask questions and I'm happy to help answer anything that they may have.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, this has been a fascinating chat, and it's really nice to get to know you and to also get to know you personally a little bit. So, Brittany, thank you so much. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate your time.
That was Brittany Johnson, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I definitely did. And I just love hearing her recommendations about the types of supplements that she likes to have, the types of supplements that would be helpful for us haggard and tired parents. And also hearing a little bit about the passion that goes into those science teams that are looking into whether new supplements on the market are effective, and that they care and they have their ethics, and they will go through these rigorous steps to do research. And often these companies will publish the data so you can have a look for yourself. So it's just really, as a little bit of a nerd at heart, I did spend a lot of time at the University of Bath doing my own researchy bit. As a nerd at heart, I really like hearing that this stuff is going on. And I'm sure you guys, if you're into taking supplements at all, you're quite happy that actually there is so much science happening behind the scenes. Do be mindful of which ones you buy. And Brittany gave some really good tips about how to make sure you get those third-party tested ones, and look into the companies if they've got scientists, teams of scientists, all these little things so you can make sure you're getting the good stuff. But yeah, it's a hopeful world. I love it. It's a really nice, positive message. So we can buy these things to help us feel a bit more energetic, to fill nutritional gaps. If we can't always get a nutritional meal 3 times a day, we can take that protein shake, or we can have that multivitamin, or you name it, something else. So yeah, I'll stop blabbing on. Before you leave, if you like my podcast, please consider giving me a little rating and review. That will make all the difference to me. And if you do, I might just read out your review in a future episode, and you'll hear your words on the episode. That would really help my podcast to grow. The algorithm loves ratings and reviews. So I thank you in advance. I will be back with you next week for another episode. So for now, I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next week.